Well, I think we're going to continue to stand for the principle that America's freedom is meant not just for our citizens, but it's meant to be an inspiration to the world, and that where we see nations, as we did in the case of Honduras, where we see people, as we did in the streets of Tehran in June, clamoring for the kinds of freedoms that the American people enjoy and the form of government that we enjoy, we're going to continue to insist that this government, this Congress, and this administration stand with those people in solidarity. I think we've seen a troubling trend since the advent of this administration of pressuring our friends and in effect accommodating people who are enemies of our values and our way of life. I think you're going to continue to see House Republicans fight for America to continue to be a beacon of freedoms and free elections around the world. Well, I think it is frustrating to millions of Americans who are weary of the borrowing, the spending, the bailouts, the takeovers of Washington, D.C., to see members of either political party supporting a continuation of those policies. But I have to tell you, it's a source of enormous pride for me that since the advent of this administration, we have had and experienced unprecedented unity among Republicans in opposition to the runaway federal spending and bailouts and takeovers of this administration. From the stimulus bill through the budget-busting budget, you saw unanimous Republican opposition and near-unanimous opposition on the cap-and-trade legislation. And I believe in the midst of the fire and fury of this health care reform debate, the American people can expect that Republicans will be united in our opposition to a government takeover of health care. Well, I believe it is arguable that when you understand this legislation, which is $1.3 trillion in new spending, over $700 billion in tax increases during the worst recession in 25 years, add into that the creation of a massive new bureaucracy, 111 new offices and agencies, the expansion of 43 entitlements, and more than 3,425 uses of the word shall in the legislation. You do realize that this is a government takeover of health care designed to grow government rather than lower the cost of health insurance to working families, small businesses, and family farms. The Republican alternative that now is online at healthcare.gop.gov is very simply focused on reducing the cost of health insurance for the American people. We allow Americans to purchase health insurance across state lines, to create new associations of groups and organizations that businesses can purchase health insurance the way big corporations do. We call for medical malpractice reform to end the era of runaway jury awards. And lastly, we take the savings from all of those things and use it to strengthen insurance funds at a state level that provide coverage in cases of where people have pre-existing conditions. But we think all of those things, lowering the cost of health insurance for working families and small businesses, lowering the cost of defensive medicine and medical malpractice reform, and making pre-existing condition insurance more available to more Americans and more affordable is the right approach. Well, I really do believe that Hispanic Americans, like every American, are people who cherish the American dream. In fact, I want to say with some measure of pride that my experience with the Hispanic community in this country gives evidence that Hispanic Americans are in many respects more energetic than the of family and marriage and the sanctity of life. These are all the values of the Republican Party, and I believe that Hispanic Americans who cherish those values will and do find a home in the Republican Party today, and I think will in increasing measure in the years to come. Well, I think one of the things that we've endeavored to do among House Republicans is simply reach out more effectively with our conservative message of entrepreneurial capitalism and traditional values into the Hispanic community. We on a regular basis translate House Republican policy documents. We produce the weekly radio Republican address in Spanish, and this year, for the first time, delivered a national radio response in Spanish. We also have been very aggressive about encouraging members to place opinion editorial pieces in Spanish-language newspapers, and we've met with Latino representatives from different organizations here in Washington and around the country. I think it's probably true that Republicans didn't work hard enough in the past to reach out to Hispanic Americans, but that's changing. House Republicans are leading the charge in changing that, and the response that we're getting from leaders in the religious community and in the business community among Hispanic Americans